All right. So I'm excited for you all to also hear from my colleagues, Shauna and Nicole, over the next couple of weeks. So I think you'll be in for a good set of sessions over the next few weeks. So really excited to be here. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about consumer food handling, some of our observational research studies, and how that impacts how we go about presenting food safety information and educating via training as well as on social media. And so, to really just kind of give you all a sense of how we operate here at NC State. So, North Carolina State University is one of the land grants in North Carolina. So we're based here in Raleigh. It's nice and hot today. So we are made up of an extension arm and an out research arm. And so I lead up the extension arm, which is really made up of developing training and educational programs. So we have a variety of programs that are designed for consumers at home, whether it's home food preservation, food safety around the holidays, disaster preparedness. Obviously, we face a lot of disasters, natural disasters in the U.S., but especially in North Carolina, we have to deal with hurricanes. So that's a big part of what we do in the way of disaster preparedness. Um, we also have educational programs that are more community facing. So we have a community meals events program. We have some farmers market curriculum, and we also do a lot to support the retail sector in North Carolina and throughout the country. And so we have a Safe Plates for Food Managers program that provides the Certified Food Protection Manager certification through our exam provider. And so we are excited to offer that as well as some other retail focused food safety courses. And so we do that in partnership with our family consumer science agents, one of whom I think is on our call today. I think I saw Virginia join. So that's a really great partnership. We really enjoy being able to share our programs throughout North Carolina. A big part of what we do in extension here in our Safe Plates program is also the Food Safety Information Center. And so we are very active on social media. So whether that's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, we do a little bit on YouTube, but that's something we're looking to grow here in the upcoming years. So I'll talk a little bit today about the work that we have done on social media and how that's informed by our research activities. So with that, our research side of our program, we do a wide variety of observational research. So actually having consumers come into our test kitchens, and I'll share some pictures with you all so you can get a sense of what our facility actually looks like. We also collect a wide variety of qualitative data. We do both qualitative and quantitative data collection, both in the way of focus groups as well as surveys about food handling behavior. So a lot of information that goes into how we think about communicating about our messaging and food safety information. And I won't go into a whole lot of detail with our behavioral models. I know maybe there are some of you who are very interested in behavior theory, but I'll just leave it at the fact that we use an integrated behavior model in terms of our education and how we think about developing pretty much all of our messaging. And so we work in the intersection of the health belief model, the behavior change wheel, and the theory of planned behavior. And so it really comes down to the fact that all of our education materials are based on the fact of increasing people's knowledge, but we also need to get at that intention and the person's perceived ability to control their own behavior. And then that can really, coupled with case studies and really applicable stories, we can really influence a person's perceived control and their intention to actually perform a food safety behavior. So all of that really goes to show that we do a wide variety of activities as part of our team, and we a lot of what we do is multiple methods as part of our research design. As I've already said, we do a lot of observational studies. Some of this has a microbiological component to it, and I'll share a little bit about that in a few minutes. Some of this includes a modeling component, so actually getting a sense of modeling how a pathogen might actually grow in a particular condition. So actually looking at the level of risk that could be associated with a particular behavior. We use existing data sets and literature reviews. As I said, we conduct a wide variety of surveys, interviews, and focus groups, and overall just innovative research design and evaluation. So we have we do a variety of research projects, which makes each day a little bit different and a lot of fun, very interesting. So I alluded to this, but this is where we do it. So these are the Gore Teaching and Research Kitchens here at NC State in our facility. So we have three consumer style test kitchens. So the picture on the right here, you can see that's one of them. So as you can see, this is a traditional kind of maybe a little bit nicer than what some of us see at home in terms of state of the art appliances and all of those things. But this is a very traditional consumer test kitchen. So we have three of those. And these are all equipped with cameras. You might be able to see one right here. So you can see two cameras set up here, another one over here. And so we have cameras set up throughout each kitchen, which actually allows us to have participants come in, prepare a meal, handle food, and we can watch them in real time. And so that's actually done here in this picture on the right. So these are computer monitors. It's a little zoomed out, but there's actually a view of each camera within the kitchen. So we can be seeing what someone's doing at the preparation sink or if they're chopping up something on the counter. And so this allows us to observe behavior in real time and identify risk factors on the spot. And so that has been really helpful with some of our research because in many of our research studies, they're structured in such a way that we have someone come into the kitchen and go through a meal preparation task, whether it's cooking and handling poultry, whether it's preparing a salad. And I'll talk through a few examples of what we've done. But then we often conduct some type of post meal preparation interview. And so we might ask some questions about how we saw them prepare food in the kitchens. So that really informs how we ask those questions. And it's not so much to call someone out for their behavior, but it allows us to ask some more nuanced questions and to really learn more specifically about someone's behavior. It also gives us a little bit of a glimpse as to whether we know in the literature that sometimes people are not entirely truthful about how they handle behavior. Sometimes people overestimate their hand washing or their good food safety handling practices, and so this gives us a chance to kind of look at that. Just to give you another couple of views of our kitchens. This is the kind of the open space in the middle when you first walk in. So to the left are the three kitchens. We also have, I don't have a picture of it here, but we have a really large teaching kitchen that's used for our teaching and instruction, and we can also live stream from there. So that's just to give you a sense of what our space actually looks like. And as I've alluded to, we have done a lot of different research, consumer research behavior over the years since these kitchen facilities were built. We've had these facilities for I think around 5 to 6 years, and so we have made very good use of them. Even just among our team, it's a department kitchen, and so we also do a wide variety of nutrition work and other research. So they are very well utilized. But I wanted to give kind of a high level summary of a really large project that we completed that was funded by USDA FSIS, where we looked at various food handling behaviors for meat and poultry products among consumers and tested food handling messages using observational studies to inform that. And so we had people come into the kitchens, prepare a meal that was defined by the research team. Each year we looked at a different food product and kind of different meal preparation, which was really provided a lot of really interesting, rich qualitative data. We conducted semi-structured interviews at the end of each meal preparation, as I mentioned. And a big component of this is that for nearly not all 5 years, but nearly all of the 5 years, we also included a microbiological surrogate as part of the study. And so this consisted of actually inoculating the meat or poultry product that was being used with a surrogate. This is a tracer microorganism that would not cause illness. It's not a foodborne pathogen, but it acts very similarly to how we see foodborne pathogens in a kitchen. And so this really allows us to get a better understanding of how pathogens can move through a kitchen and to see how cross-contamination can actually occur. So again, really provided us with a lot of really interesting data when it comes to understanding how cross-contamination occurs. And so these studies, these this different over the 5 years, even though we did different foods, we prepared different foods. We had a similar structure for all 5 years of the study, and this really looked like recruiting participants to come in and prepare a meal. And so the part of the recruitment was a very critical step because this was what's considered a deception study. So basically, people did not know they were coming in to be observed for their food handling behavior in terms of food safety. So we commonly recruited people under the guise of testing a new spice blend or testing a new recipe. And so this was really important so that we didn't influence how someone behaved in a kitchen. So if you think about the fact that if you know you're being watched, you already are going to slightly alter your behaviors. But if you know that you're being watched for food safety handling behaviors, you're even more likely to alter your behaviors. So we try to really limit the amount that someone alters their behaviors by kind of sending them in another direction in terms of what they think the study is about. So that's the recruitment. We have them actually come into the kitchens. As I mentioned, we tested different food handling messages as part of this, and so we're looking at the four different handling behaviors related to cooking, chilling. So using a food thermometer, cleaning and sanitizing, and some of the different food handling behaviors that are recommended by USDA and other food safety educators. That we also looked a lot at hand washing throughout meal preparation. So whether someone washed their hands before they started preparing a meal, whether they washed their hands after handling the raw meat or poultry products, so things like that. So overall, as part of this 5 year study, we conducted over 1,200 observations. So that's 1,200 separate people who came in and prepared a meal. We have nearly 3,000 hours of video coding. So, in some cases, participants were in the kitchens for a couple of hours preparing a meal because we would usually have them prepare multiple food products. So it's as if they were preparing a meal at home for their family. So it would often be a meat product and then some type of side salad or some other side dish that goes along with it. We have over 25,000 minutes of recorded interviews from those semi-structured interviews that occurred at the end that were informed by food handling behaviors. Um, and then we have over 6,000 hand washing events as seen by that. I think the big takeaway from this here is that only 83 of those 6,686 hand washing events were successful. And so we define successful as the criteria that's defined by CDC. I know many of you are probably familiar with it, but looking at those steps with someone washing their hands of wetting their hands, using soap, rubbing for 15 to 20 seconds and drying their hands with a paper towel. So only 83 of those hand washing events checked all the boxes in terms of that. So that for us really highlighted that there's a long way to go in terms of messaging around hand washing, and there's some improvements to be made. Some improvements is maybe an understatement here. So that's just to kind of give you a high level there. And as I mentioned, we also included microbiological surrogates in many of these studies, and so this allowed us to see where and what points of the kitchen were most likely to be contaminated. 1 year of the study where we had participants prepare turkey burgers. We saw that spice containers were very heavily contaminated. We've also seen areas of the sink be a high hotspot for contamination, and I'll talk a little bit more in detail about that in a few minutes. Um, We've also seen things like the refrigerator handle be other areas of contamination. So just, really adds to kind of the whole story of how cross-contamination can occur in a kitchen at home. So I'm going to walk through some specifics now on just one of the years that focused on poultry washing, just because I think it is a really interesting study, what we learned from it, and how, and really because it really, in the data that we collected through that study helped inform how we talk about poultry messaging or poultry washing when it comes to our messaging, both on social media and when we are, teaching. So that's just to kind of give you an overview of our products here. So as I mentioned, we recruit people to participate in the study. For this one, we observed over 300 people who were self-reported as poultry washers to understand their specific practices. And so the focus of this particular year of the study was on how people wash their poultry, if for the group of people who report washing their poultry, how they do it, and whether their behavior can be influenced by messaging. And so we had people screened as part of the recruitment to learn whether they wash their poultry or not. But there were a couple of things that they didn't know as part of this. And so this goes back to our deception study. So one thing they didn't know is that we were observing their food handling behavior. And so we told them specifically with this that we are testing a new spice blend to be used on chicken. So they came in and prepared chicken and a salad. And so I believe the order of it was that they, prepared the chicken, applied the spice blends, and put it in the oven. Um, the other part of this that they didn't know, because they didn't know the food safety part, they also didn't know that the chicken was actually inoculated with a harmless tracer microorganism. And as I mentioned before, we have these inoculation components of the study where we're actually seeing how salmonella can spread through a kitchen. And so this, as part of this, we had the person put the poultry, once the chicken was ready to be cooked, we had them put it in the oven. We took them out of the kitchen and interviewed them under the guise of the spice blend. And that allowed our micro team to come in and actually swab the kitchen throughout the kitchens, particularly around the sink, to get a sense of what contamination occurred in and around the sink. And then we had them come in, finish the meal preparation study, and then we had them clean and sanitize as they would at home. And so following that, we had the micro team come back in to clean and sanitize the same surfaces and areas of the kitchen to provide a comparison to see actually how effective was that cleaning and sanitizing process. And so to give a few overview points, we saw that about 85% of the folks who said that they washed their poultry rinsed it in the sink. So that was really helpful data, just in terms of knowing that the majority of people who wash their poultry do wash it in the sink. That 15% remaining, they might have soaked it in a bowl. That was a more common method, if not used in the sink. So this again gives us more data when in the better we know about how someone can handles a food and behaves in the kitchen, the better we can target our messaging. So ultimately, we saw that 26% of participants that washed their raw poultry transferred bacteria from that raw poultry to their ready-to-eat salad lettuce. So, a fourth of people were actually contaminated their salad that will not be cooked in any way. So that was really a notable point from this. We think that this contamination could have happened in a variety of ways, but one big contributor could have been the fact that they, contaminated the area in and around the sink. And if they washed their salad or, contaminated their hands near or around the sink, that could have led to the contamination as well. So we also saw here that of the participants who washed the raw poultry, 60% had surrogate bacteria in the sink after washing or rinsing the poultry. So what we saw here is that 14% still had the surrogate in their sinks after they attempted to clean the sink. And so we're seeing, so what that means is 14% of people did what they, did what they consider to be a thorough cleaning and sanitizing job. And again, they're in someone else's kitchen, so they're probably even upping the ante a little bit in terms of the effort they're putting in to clean. So we're still seeing that that surrogate is still in the sink. And so that really highlights the need for cleaning and sanitizing. So this really led to an opportunity to really communicate specifically about poultry washing, as well as the need for cleaning and sanitizing. And so up here at the top, you'll see this picture of Dr. Mindy Brashear. So she is the current undersecretary for food safety, but she was also the undersecretary at the time that this study was done. And so it was really exciting to have her come and visit the kitchens and observe some of it. But this resulted in a lot of press and gave us the opportunity to really think a lot more about specifically how we craft the messaging around washing raw poultry. And so a big part of this is really highlighting the importance of cleaning and cleaning and sanitizing in the right order. So that really led to making sure that people have an understanding of what cleaning is, what sanitizing is, that there is a difference, and that it has to be done in the correct order. And so this leads me to talking a little bit about how we think about our messages. So I wanted to set the stage a little bit with how we conduct our research and then how we go about taking that research and applying it in our messaging, whether it's in a training program or in a social media post. And so there are a few steps to this. Of course, there's that investigation component. We have to know what people are actually doing. And even better if we can find out why they're doing what they're doing. So can really get at that in those semi-structured interviews that follow the observation studies. So we might ask questions like, "Well, I noticed that you washed your poultry at this point. What can you tell us a little bit about why you do that?" Or, "I noticed that you cleaned and sanitized at this point during the meal preparation. Can you talk a little bit about why that's important?" So again, having a really clear understanding of what people are doing and why they're doing it is going to result in a more effective message because it can be more specific. So from there, we design the targeted messages. So we have that data, we have all of the evidence of what people are actually doing, and it allows us to develop a more specific message. We're putting the info where it's consumed. So again, making sure that we're meeting people where they are, and also trying to reach them in through different means, whether it's social media or through another learning opportunity that they see. And then it goes to evaluating the message. And so with training programs, we see this done in a more formal way where we're actually collecting evaluation data and learning what they learned from the course or the training program. With social media, it's a little bit more iterative, but we kind of look at metrics of how well something did. We look at comments, and I'll talk a little bit more about social media messaging here in a second. Um, so with message development, something that is really important to our team is that it is based in the science, and we are able to develop messaging that's based in the science because we're actually doing the science in some cases, or we're relying on our research partners and our colleagues in the field who are also out there doing great research in terms of understanding human behavior. And so the first kind of underlying foundation for how we talk about, or for really any information that we put out there on any platform, is all about risk communication. And so this comes down to explaining the risk, but doing it in a straightforward and simple way that allows a person to take away from it that they can clearly understand what risks might be associated with the behavior. So this is not the opportunity to, share your very in-depth scientific overview with, all of the long, rambling sentences and all of the citations and references. This is your opportunity to really be down to earth and to share the information in simple language. There, of course, we work in science, in food safety, we are often talking about pathogens. And so even a word like pathogen might be something that you want to consider defining. Similarly, other bacteria that maybe come up that someone hasn't heard of, giving someone a little bit of context for what that means. We also really try to avoid using absolutes. So people tend to not react overly well when you tell them not to do something or to avoid doing something. And I'll share an example here in a minute. But usually, what we try to do is try to more address the idea of using a positive behavior. So I'll show an example of that in a minute rather than telling someone not to do something. A big part of our developing our message once we have communicated that risk is thinking about that cue to action because we want to be able to share the risk information with people, but then ultimately give them well, what can I do about it? So this is really where there's the opportunity to offer options for reducing risk and then including any action or preventable tip. And so to take it back to the poultry washing for a minute, this is a social media graphic that we use on Instagram, and I believe we use it on our on X now too, where we this is something that we post a lot around Thanksgiving, just because that's a common time that people are thinking about preparing turkeys, especially the whole bird at that point. And so this is where we're telling them to know the risks. So here we have that risk communication component being underlined. We say that washing raw poultry won't kill bacteria, that only cooking to the proper temperature of 165 will. And then we highlight the risk of pathogens that are commonly found in raw poultry that that there's possibility of them spreading from washing. And so then we point out ways to prevent the spread of bacteria. And so here it's cleaning and sanitizing utensils and surfaces and washing hands after prepping raw poultry. And so we've made the choice here not to tell people not to wash their turkey, because again, that's ultimately up to what someone wants to do in their home. But we do really want to highlight here that washing your poultry is not going to remove the bacteria, so that if you are washing your poultry to remove bacteria, that is not an effective way to do it. Cooking is the effective way to do it, but we have some other ways to prevent the spread of bacteria, and so we highlight hand washing and cleaning and sanitizing. So that's just to kind of tie it back to the poultry washing that we saw in that observation study. So another really critical part to building messages that we incorporate into our message building, and this kind of goes back to that risk communication piece, is knowing your audience. So whether you're thinking about whether you're constructing a message and thinking about communicating with an audience of consumers is probably going to look very different from how you communicate with someone who works in a retail food establishment or is a food handler in some way. So knowing your audience is really critical. It's not going to be a one size fits all approach. Practicing cultural humility, so recognizing that different cultures and different groups of people are going to be they may have different ways of handling food, they may have different traditions and beliefs associated with how they handle those foods, and being aware that you probably aren't aware of all of those things can really go a long way. Another really key component of any messaging is using readability and accessibility tools. And so something that our team does is uses the Flesh Kincaid method to actually they assign a score for your messaging or whatever your document is. You can do it for anything, and with the idea in mind that the average reading level of the average American is seventh to eighth grade level. If you target a seventh to eighth grade reading level, that's ensuring that about 80% of people can read and interpret the information that you're doing. And this can be easier said than done, especially when we start introducing names of pathogens. The readability of something is also influenced by how long sentences are, and just the overall word count. And so all of these things feed into how accessible something is and how readable it is. So those are things that we tend to focus on as well. This is still something that we think about when it comes to social media. One of the benefits of social media, of course, as many of you probably know, is that it's short, it's to the point. There's not a lot of opportunity to be overly flowery. So that's one way that social media can be such an effective communication tool. So a couple of other things that I wanted to talk about, as we're kind of starting to think about social media as part of this work. We have what I talked about earlier in terms of our traditional consumer observation, where we're having someone come into a kitchen and see how they're handling food. So we're seeing that direct behavior. But I also see social media as a really kind of new and emerging observation tool in and of itself. So not only is a tool that we can use to communicate about risk, about food safety, handling behavior, but we can also learn about how someone handles their food or thinks about risk through using social media itself. And so, if there is a topic you want to educate someone on, if you are an educator and want to really highlight a specific food safety topic, I recommend taking some time to see what people are talking about related to that topic on social media. I think the most effective ways of learning about these handling behaviors would probably be through Instagram or TikTok, just because of how they function. Um, so getting a sense of what questions people are asking, what are they posting about, what information is already out there. TikTok especially has really evolved over the last handful of years. So we have really been able to see its potential and kind of use for our purposes kind of grow and evolve. So one thing that we have learned, and I should caveat this with some of this comes from conversations with my one of my Gen Z coworkers. So who's definitely plugged into TikTok and has learned a lot about it over the last few years. Is that TikTok is being used as a search engine on its own now. There are certain audiences, particularly Gen Z and young audiences, who might want to learn more about a topic. And so instead of Googling something, they might actually just go to TikTok and search it. And so this is where I think food safety educators can really use this to their benefit. TikTok also has implemented a lot of tools in terms of search optimization and using like key phrases, particular hashtags. So if you use that as part of the post that you're putting out there, that can really play up to getting it to the audience that you're looking at. So search optimization is something that has really evolved and grown a lot on TikTok. And so in some ways, I see TikTok as kind of what Pinterest was 10 or 15 years ago. Pinterest kind of became its own search engine, and we see the TikTok now being that way as well. Um, so there are a lot of other, we could spend a whole presentation talking about kind of tips for social media, but just overall thinking about the fact that, that I think we can learn a lot about people's behaviors on Instagram and TikTok. Just as an example, taking some time to learn about air fryers. Air fryers have really been growing in popularity. If you type, how to clean your air fryer into TikTok, you get a ton of hits. Some of them I'm sure are great advice. Some of them I'm sure are not great advice. They probably have some, bizarre cleaning solution that they've made up themselves. So, there's a lot of opportunity, I think, to learn more about how people are actually handling food and using tools in their kitchen on these social media platforms. Um, I did in the last few minutes that I have for us today, I wanted to highlight a few other studies that we've done over the years. So I talked a little bit about our consumer observation study. So this was a study that we did related to the safe handling instructions that are found on non-ready to eat meat and poultry products. And so this was a study where we tested different types of safe handling instructions just to learn more about how the format of the label and the icons that were used and actual wording to determine which held participants' attention and which helps them to be able to best distinguish between a ready-to-eat product and a non-ready-to-eat product. We also looked at which safe handling instruction labels resulted in greater adherence. So actually had an eye tracking activity. So you can see, for those of you who know Ben Chapman, he's here in the middle, modeling our eye tracking glasses. So these are things that people actually wore as they were looking at the labels. Here on the right, we have these mock-ups of packages. And so we were actually able to see how long people looked at a label, what held their gaze, and there's some really cool metrics that can come from this type of eye tracking. And of benefit to industry from this is actually also included a cost benefit analysis. It actually allowed us to compare the value of the benefits from predicted reductions in foodborne illness associated with the cost in the industry with if they were to voluntarily change their packaging. So that's just to give a little bit of a high level about safe handling instructions. We've also done some eye tracking research related to recall messages. So this is we conducted a controlled study of how a recall notice is designed and whether the design of it influences what consumers do in a kitchen. And so we had 59 participants come in and view recall notices while wearing one of the eye tracking devices, and then they completed a meal preparation task in an interview. And so we had a control, so I think what a typical recall notice might look like, and then two redesigned recall notices. And so what we were looking at here was where the consumer was looking on the notice and how quickly they reached the key information. So was it a situation of they were reading, and just kind of scanning it? Were they able to look and see the important information right away? Then we looked at the actual behavior, so whether they handled the product safely afterward in the kitchen task. So were they able to, um, you know, actually identify that recalled product in the kitchen? And then this allowed us to see their perception of it. So how clear they thought each notice was, and we asked them more about that in the follow-up interview. And so what we ultimately found, the control had a lower rate of product avoidance. And so the template design significantly changed protective behavior. And so we saw that one of the redesigns more than tripled safe handling compared with the original notice. So we saw that 85% had product avoidance with that particular template. We also saw with those redesigned templates that consumers were reaching that key product identification information up to 10 times faster. So that's really critical to think about. And so how clear someone thought a notice was did not actually predict whether they acted safely. So that really highlights the fact that what works has to be tested, not just assumed. So, it might be a thing where if you hear someone talk about the clarity of a notice, you might think, oh, that's going to be the most effective one. But here that was not the case. So with that, just wanted to kind of give you some high levels of some research that we've done in our kitchens over the last few years. Just to I couldn't really have time to dive into the details of a lot, but I hope that gave you a sense of some of the work that we've done. Would be happy to take any questions, and my email is here if you'd like to reach out afterwards as well.